Where Innovation Happens, Episode 20, Congressman Seth Moulton, Supporting Innovation in Washington. Tonight's conversation with Congressman Seth Moulton is also going to be recorded and broadcasted on my podcast, Where Innovation Happens. You're the first live audience podcast edition that we've done. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tim Rowe. I'm the founder and CEO of Cambridge Innovation Center. I've been doing this for 27 years. For our guest, Congressman Moulton, who, as I think most people know, is running for US Senate. This is a slice of the entrepreneurial community here in Kendall Square. We're at Venture Café, which happens every week. We have about 400 or 500 people each week that come in. And the goal here is that entrepreneurs and innovators get to know each other. The goal is to build what we call the innovation community, to make it a little easier to build businesses. I think many people know your background, but I'm just going to summarize it a little bit for the audience. Okay. Seth is a local guy, went to Harvard. He graduated, and unlike many people who went to Harvard, Seth went into the US Marines for, I'm going to get this wrong, how many tours?
4 tours.
That's a lot of time serving this country. Came back, decided to be an entrepreneur.
Well, I went to business school first.
Right.
And I went down to Texas to work on a high-speed rail project. And when I was there, I got this very strange phone call from someone who was recruiting young veterans to run for office. And I said no repeatedly. I'm happily living in Texas. You don't move to Texas if you're planning to run for office in Massachusetts. But here I am. I gave it a shot, got in a long shot race against a 9-term incumbent, and won.
Wow.
So that's a quick story.
So, and now you're up against an incumbent.
Another long-time incumbent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How many years has your incumbent been in office?
Just 50.
Okay.
He's been elected longer than I've been alive. Yeah, Markey. He's a good man, totally good man. You know, done his time, done his service. But I do think it's time for a new generation of leadership. I mean, you just can't look at what's happening in America today and say, let's do more of the same.
I think one of the questions that this crowd will have for you is, as a person representing Massachusetts and Washington, from an innovation perspective, we've got a few challenges, right? Yeah. One of them is, I think everyone here knows, it can be a little expensive to operate a business in Massachusetts. The housing is expensive in particular. What are there some things that strike you as, here's some things we can work on in Massachusetts to make this a better place for innovators?
Well, let's just start with housing. I spoke at an incubator. It was down the road a little bit. And there's an amazing group of young entrepreneurs. And I think the best question came from a 23-year-old who said, I came to Massachusetts to go to some of the best schools in the world. And I started a company here because I met some of the smartest people in the world. And now I'm going to move my company because we can't afford to live here.
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
And so that's just a reality. We've got to address housing costs. I've done 50 town halls across the state as part of my Senate campaign, in contrast to my opponent who's done one. And the number one question that I hear from people is, how do we bring down housing costs? And look, it's not a new problem. And this is something that, again, we've faced for a long time. And obviously the playbook, whatever we've been trying, hasn't been working. The new idea that I'm bringing to this debate is that if we dramatically improved our transportation options, so you could just get from where you want to work to where you can afford to live, it would be a totally different story. And if you look around the globe, some of the wealthiest cities, most expensive cities in the world, like Tokyo and London, for example, you can afford to live there because they have great transportation. You can get around faster than driving. So my vision is make it faster than driving to get around Massachusetts. And you do it pretty simply. You just need to create a modern electrified regional rail service. You have to connect North and South Station so that you don't have this like wall in the middle of the city that you can't possibly live in north of the city and work south of the city. Like I live in Salem, right? There's no way that my wife could get a job west of Boston or south of Boston today because you can't get there at rush hour, right? Even though on a map, it's not that far away. This would make it faster than driving to go right through the city. All the trains from the north go through the south and west. Imagine getting to the Cape on a Friday in like 50 minutes. Imagine getting to Springfield in less than an hour. That's what we're talking about. It's not rocket science. It's not, you're doing rocket science, all right? Like you guys are the real innovators. This is actually what dozens of cities have done around the world, but we just can't get there. We jump up and down when the red line goes the same speed that it did in 1950 for the first time in 50 years, and that's just not good enough.
So I think the average home in Massachusetts sells for something like $800,000, and the average citizen of Massachusetts, when you look at their income and what they should be paying for a home, it's around $400,000, something like that. So we've got this big gap. But to your point, if you look at the cost of a home in, say, Fitchburg, it's around $400,000. It's in that neighborhood. So if
And
we could
Fitchburg
just
is
get
actually,
there.
I love that you use Fitchburg as an example. How many of you have been to Fitchburg? A few, but if you could get there in 45 minutes instead of an hour and a half,
Right.
a lot more of you would go there. And Fitchburg has this really great downtown, like historic downtown, with a lot of opportunities. They're refurbishing buildings as we speak for new housing. But it also has the sort of remnants of an old GE plant that happened to be right next to downtown. There's just all this available land that could totally be developed. One rail line has about the capacity of 12 highway lanes.
Do you see a path in our current politics, our current world, to get that kind of
Oh,
investment?
absolutely. And there's a study coming out of Harvard soon on this. But it turns out that if you make these investments, and especially if you just connect North and South Station, which is a project that's long overdue. It was first delayed due to the onset of, does anyone know? World War I. Okay. So it's been a good idea for a long time. All right. But when you do that, you don't have to have all these rail yards in downtown Boston because trains don't come in and get stuck at North Station and stuck at South Station. So you create all this developable land right in the heart of the city that pays for the project.
So in the innovation community, we hear a lot about the pushback on AI and data centers and things like that. And yet this is where a lot of the innovation is happening. Do you have a kind of a recipe around what we do about data centers and AI?
Yeah, so I mean, look, this is a really important question. And if you look at the surveys right now, people in Massachusetts are really down on AI. So I'm just curious for all of you here, I'm going to ask just two answers. How many are optimistic about AI? How many are pessimistic? So optimistic, how many people are optimistic about AI? How many people are pessimistic about AI?
So this is the
Okay,
innovation
so this
crowd,
is
yeah.
like this is like 80-20 optimists, right? In Massachusetts as a whole, it's like 70-30. 70 pessimistic, 30% optimistic. And so yes, you are the innovators. You know that AI is coming. It's not going to go away. It's going to be a part of our future whether we want it or not. And what we need to do is figure out how to embrace it and make it safe so that it doesn't ruin our cities, pollute our waters, raise electricity prices, make housing too expensive, all the things that are legitimate concerns that people have, but also don't hold us back from being the world leaders in AI, because I want to make sure that people all around the world, when they need AI, come to America to get it, and we're not, using AI from China or other competitors. So there's sort of three principles that I have, and one is that, yes, you have to make it safe. And that means some degree of regulation. It means holding AI companies accountable. You can't just tell kids how to kill themselves and get away with it, right? We've totally failed to do this with social media. Totally failed, right? I mean, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old girl at home. The idea of them getting to be teenagers and being on social media is frightening as a parent because the statistics. They're terrible, right? So let's just acknowledge that the last big technology, social media, that really started almost exactly 20 years ago, 2005 or so, we've totally failed to make it safe, and we've got to fix that with AI. We also have legitimate concerns people bring up about, okay, well, if this data center is going to take all of the local electricity, does that mean my bills are going to go up? Not necessarily, it turns out, but you got to make sure that's the case. And the data centers and the developers of those data centers should be responsible for building the infrastructure.
They're bringing additional power.
Yeah, they're bringing additional power. In some cases, they actually contribute to refurbishing the electrical lines, which takes those costs away from consumers. But the point is, that's not going to happen on its own. It's not going to happen out of goodwill. We've got to make sure that that happens. So I'm not with Bernie Sanders in saying that we should ban data centers, because that just means they're going to get built overseas. And your data, by the way, is going to live overseas with uncertain controls as opposed to living here, right? But we've got to make sure that if data centers come in, they help communities, not hurt communities, right? So make the AI safe. And by the way, at the end of the day, people want to use safe models, right? So it's not in conflict with innovation. It's just something that we need to ensure as a society. Number two, we do need to win the AI race. And that's up to people like you, right? You're the innovators who we need to empower to make sure that you have the tools and the opportunity and like the basics like affordable housing to make sure that we win the AI race, because we don't want to be buying AI from authoritarian regimes like China. And then the third thing I'd say is there will be job displacement. How many people think that someday you're going to lose your job to AI? You're very optimistic. I love that.
In another room.
But in another room in
Yeah,
Massachusetts, out in Western Massachusetts, for example, where a lot of people have seen a lot of jobs go away over the last 20 years, people are really concerned. And some of those concerns are pretty legitimate.
Oh, it is.
I mean, imagine if you take an agentic AI that just takes out like every paralegal in America, for example, right? And that's pretty easy to envision. That's a lot of people out of work. It's great for the law partners. They're making more money. Their margins are higher because they don't have to pay paralegals, right? It's great for the AI companies that sell this technology. It's really bad for the paralegals and their families. So I think we have to be able to figure out how to support people like that who lose their jobs. And I think about almost like a FEMA-like disaster fund that comes in, because we can't possibly predict what these jobs are going to be. I'm not saying that we in Congress are ever going to keep up with the pace of the industry, but we've got to be able to respond if a lot of people are out of work and make sure they find a place to land.
In the year 1800, I looked this up recently, we had 70 to 80% of people in the United States that were involved in agriculture. And today that's about 2%. So we've gone through one of these transitions before where essentially what everybody did disappeared.
Right.
But we had a long time for that to happen. What do you do where it happens quickly? If you look at travel agents, seem like they disappeared kind of almost overnight, right? What are the things we might do, or you could do as a leader to help ease that change? We're not going to stop innovation,
Right.
but what can we do?
Well, I think it's because the pace of change could be so fast. I mean, you know, in that revolution, right? Oh, this farm went away, that farm went away. You know, it was very slow over time, and we still have farms in Massachusetts, although farming kind of generally trends down over time, right? I actually spent a little time at a dairy farm just a couple weeks ago, and they're doing well, but they've seen a lot of farms around them, you know, slowly succumb to development. This could happen very quickly. Like every paralegal in the country could lose their job in the space of a month. And that's why I'm saying that it's pretty reasonable to think that this is a place where the government should be able to come in and help people out. You know, just like we have unemployment insurance, like there might have to be, you know, some way to just help these people transition to new jobs. And what I'm saying is we can't anticipate exactly what they will be, right? Remember when Democrats said, okay, to deal with climate change, and I'm being self-critical as a Democrat here, right? We're going to close the coal mines, but don't worry, we're going to train all the coal miners to be computer programmers. That was like 6 years ago, and it would have been a really bad idea because computer programmers are some of the first people to get automated out of existence, right? So we can't necessarily figure out exactly where this is going ahead of time, but we do have to be responsive. I have a friend who's looking at a great opportunity for like service opportunities connected with AI, sort of like a national service program like AmeriCorps or something like that. I think that's a great idea that should be on the table, but there's got to be programs like that catch people and help them thrive in an AI-enabled world.
AmeriCorps for paralegals.
I don't mean to hate on paralegals. I'm just like an easy example.
So you've mentioned China a few times, and I believe you're on the China committee.
The select committee on China.
Thank you. So should we be worried about China? Is it our partner? What do we need to do? You've come with a defense and military background, and you're probably privy to things that the rest of us are not. How should we think about China?
Well, I mean, first of all, like we want to have in the long run China be our partner, peacefully collaborating in a multipolar world, right? Right now, we do have to be concerned because the leader of China, Xi Jinping, has made it very clear that he wants to invade Taiwan. And most people like don't want to talk about this, don't want to worry about it, not a concern. I will tell you, sitting on the Armed Services Committee, sitting on the China Committee, it is a real concern. A lot of people said that Putin wasn't really going to invade Ukraine. I mean, he said he would, he wrote about it, he talked about it a lot, but I don't know, that doesn't seem to make sense. That's a tough war to win, but guess what? Sometimes dictators tell you what they're going to do. And Xi Jinping is not spending tens of billions of dollars building up an amphibious navy to take over Mongolia, right? Like this is like it's pretty clear about what he wants to do. And the problem is that if he invades Taiwan and we live up to our nominal commitment to support Taiwan, then that's a huge war. A lot of young people getting killed. We could wake up tomorrow with 2 U.S. aircraft carriers at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and 4,000 apiece, 8,000
Service
kids
bonds, yeah.
dead.
Right.
Right? So this is a really serious problem, and that's why we have to be really focused on deterring and preventing a war with China. Good reason, by the way, not to get bogged down in a war in the Middle East.
So you've been critical of our president and one of the stronger voices of what we might call the young Democrats. I'm a Democrat, not everyone in the room may be, but given your politics and mine, how do we handle the next couple of years under Trump? Where do we go? How do we kind of push back against the politics that we're seeing? And I don't know if it's really politics. It's the craziness that we're seeing.
Yeah. I mean, it is totally wild. And it's a wild time to be in D.C. right now, not in a good way. I just got off a flight from D.C. It's often frightening what happens every day. And people often ask me, Seth, is it as bad as it seems? You're on the inside, like, tell me, is it as bad as it seems? And I would love to be able to tell you it's not as bad as the news makes it out to be. Everything's under control. And that is not the case. Honestly, I mean, when people say, is it as bad as it seems? I say every day it's worse. It's worse than MS Now or whoever you want to say thinks it is. It's really bad. When you know what's going on the inside and you have a little bit of an inkling into what's going on in the White House, it's a very frightening scene. So first of all, we've got to admit, speaking as a Democrat here, that whatever we've been doing up to this point really isn't working very well because we've got a second term of Donald Trump. MAGA controls everything in Washington. Costs are going up for everybody across the country. We've started wars around the globe that we don't need to start. We're making it more likely that we have a war with China that could literally be World War III. All these things are bad. And so I'm very focused on making Democrats win. Democrats have to win. If this isn't proof that winning in elections matters, I'm not sure what is. So we've got to have some change in the Democratic Party. And the good news is that we are seeing change. We are seeing a new generation of Democratic leaders come up in races across the country. I'm not the only one challenging an 80-year-old. And again, challenging him with respect and saying, sir, thank you for your service, but we need a new generation of fighters who can fight and win against Trump and the MAGA Republicans because the stakes are too high. And the playbook that we've been using just clearly isn't.
Well, they had their shot.
Well enough. Had your shot, right? Housing prices have been a problem for a long time. We've tried for 50 years. I'm not sure what you're going to do differently in the next 6. Let's get some new people with some new ideas. And you're seeing this happen across the country. A little bit after we lost the 24 election across the board, we lost the White House, the House, we didn't get back the Senate. There were 3 real bright spots on the East Coast because Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, Zoran Mandami in New York City, those were like the 3 Democratic wins. They were all next generation leaders, all willing to challenge the party establishment and say, it's time for some new ideas. And that's just what we need right now in the party and I think in our politics across the country.
So those of you who are longtime Massachusetts voters, you'll know Senator Markey, well-respected, and we've heard that also from Seth. You're a little less well-known because you're a congressman rather than a senator.
Yeah.
You're
I represent 1/9 of the state as opposed to the whole thing.
And yet, in the last poll, I saw your 5-6 percentage points. That was even a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Down, so pretty close.
Very
and
close.
Could you help anybody who's thinking about, who should I go for and why? What are the sort of real distinctions that someone from the innovation community might care about?
Well, honestly, like in general, we're pretty similar on policy. I mean, we're both Democrats. We're both from Massachusetts. They're not like big policy issues like healthcare or something like that where we have any significant differences. But there is a big difference actually in support for innovation because Senator Markey has been blocking the SBIR program, which is what a lot of young companies use to get started.
How many people are familiar with SBIRs? Yeah, this whole room.
So it's a little bit odd, but for whatever reason, he's the one single person out of 100 senators who has been blocking the reauthorization. He finally unstuck it largely in response to the pressure that we put on him politically. He's been trying to save that money for the really big firms called Cyber Mills that sort of vacuum up all this funding and do things for the Pentagon. That's not what the program is intended to do. It's intended to go to people like you who are innovating new companies with great new ideas that we need to grow. So, I mean, I think that's a That's a big difference.
You've talked about actually kind of renovating the SBIR program to make it more focused on the small
Even more
organizations.
focused, that's right.
How would you do that? What are the rules changes that we need?
That's right. Well, we basically need to prevent what's happening now. I mean, allowing these big established companies to vacuum up all this funding. We would just say, you're not allowed to do that. Like, it really does need to go to small and new companies, which is what the program is intended to do. And that's one of the innovations that I would like to bring. There's also just a little bit of a difference in, I think, approach to a lot of issues. Senator Markey has been a longtime champion of the environment. I actually have a better voting record on the environment. I have a higher lifetime voting score from the League of Conservation Voters. But he's very, very anti-nuclear, just like reflective anti-nuclear, which is sort of a very 1970s view. And I understand he grew up in the 1970s. That's where we are. Look, fusion technology is the future of electricity production. We want it to happen here in Massachusetts. It's not a good thing that Commonwealth Fusion just said their first big project is going to be in Virginia. I mean, they picked another Commonwealth, but not the Commonwealth that we would like, right? There's a lot of innovation in science in the nuclear space and in other spaces, AI and other things, that we need to support and embrace and not just sort of be reflexively against. So, strange little fact, if I win this Senate race, I will be the first senator in United States history with a physics degree. And I think that's probably a good thing. Like, we could use some science in the Senate.
Speaking of your science focus, one of the things you talked about is making some changes at the FDA as well. What are you looking to see happen in the FDA? Because I know we have a lot of bio entrepreneurs.
Yeah, how many bio entrepreneurs in here? Okay, handful.
Mattering,
yeah. The FDA is a bureaucracy with great important mission, and they're really slow. And so innovation is outpacing the FDA in being able to approve things. At the same time, we've got to remember that the FDA does have an important mission to make everything safe, but clearly it needs to be modernized. A lot of clinical trials are going overseas because the bureaucracy is just too difficult here at home. And so there are basic problems like that, I should say, that we need to address to make sure that the FDA is keeping up with the pace of innovation. And that ultimately will help our international competitiveness as well.
Are you okay taking questions?
Love to.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I may repeat the question because I don't know if we have mics or are you grabbing the mic?
You repeat.
Although I think this room picks up your voice anyway, so I'll just sort of go around. I'll start over here.
Hi, my name is Darshan. I am currently a rising junior at University.
Awesome.
And I just got my first co-op, but kind of wanted to go back to like your paralegal point, like how disappearing, and especially within the tech and AI world, how do you see people like getting up to that senior level? Because the senior level is kind of what's left, right? So like, how would you see people like getting up to that level without having experience, right? Because now they say you need experience when your first job, right? So how does that like fit into the picture?
I don't know that I'm going to give you great job advice, but I'll try. It's a good question. I mean, a lot of people are concerned, how do I fit into this AI-enabled world? One thing is that when things change like this, like people coming off of farms, it's because of the Industrial Revolution. There were a lot of new jobs, a lot of new innovations, a lot of new companies. And that's why all of you are so important, because you are not just innovators, you are job creators. And you are creating jobs in an AI-enabled world, whether it's in biotech and AI directly. I mean, AI itself is actually creating a lot of jobs right now, at the same time as it takes some away. So actually, I think that critical to succeeding in this world is recognizing that there are going to be a lot of innovative companies, and you might want to, hitch your saddle to one of these rising companies to move into the world and get some senior experience. It could be a world that's fast changing, and so you're not just going to go to a company and work your way up the ladder for 50 years the way maybe like my parents did or something, right? So I think we have to be flexible and recognize that these things are going to change. I think also lifelong education is a big thing, right? I just don't think that it's good enough to, get a college degree and then say, okay, I never have to learn something different for the rest of my life. We're probably going to have to keep learning.
Yeah, it's not going to stop. So I'm going to keep sweeping around, sir.
Hi, my name is Levi. I'm an immigrant to this country from Trinidad.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I've been here for 27 years, so. I realized that housing is a very important thing because when my mom came here, she was able to purchase a house, and that helped create a stability for my sister and I to get a higher education. I lost my job to AI because I worked for MGH and it was implemented and my job went away.
Okay.
When that happened, I came up with an idea to create affordable housing because I hear the term thrown around a lot, but yet still the big developers and investors are creating housing that the blue collar workers can't afford. So I created a strategy, well, my company, to create homes that can be sold for around $400,000. It takes about $200,000 to build. It's recycled steel. It uses solar energy and small wind turbines that go on the homes to help generate clean energy. The problem I'm having is getting startup money to get me going because I'm sure you're familiar with the MBTA plans to develop ADUs and homes near
Right.
transit lines. So I'm all for your idea for high-speed transit lines into the city, and I want to be part of that to build homes closer to those lines. But I can't find the right funding, and when I reach out to the state legislature and stuff like that,
So let me jump in because I want to make sure we get to a lot of questions. But Levi, first of all, what an amazing example of someone who, he got automated out of existence and he's found a new important role as an innovator. So thank you. And you're doing something that's incredibly important. I mean, literally affordable housing is the number one issue I hear around the state. So you're a great example for how to thrive in this increasingly AI-enabled world. But you're right. I mean, capital is a problem. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the SBIR program is important. That's why also, we have to look at ways that we can subsidize innovation in housing, as opposed to just the old model, the 1970s model, which is a government comes in and builds a big housing project, right? Not a very modern way to address this problem. Some of that money maybe should go to innovators like you.
Thank you, Congressman. Frank.
I've worked in engineering, manufacturing, business technology, and policy. And I wanted to zoom in on this transition because from my experience, what we're going to go through is more like what we did in the 1990s, where we both had to adjust to the shifts in manufacturing because of China's low-cost invasion. And then, particularly in Western Mass and in certain other areas, the shift away from as much military manufacturing with the fall of the wall. So as a society, we blew it. We argued about industrial policy and said, no, we don't need it. And now politicians talk about things that sure sound like industrial policy, but they won't use that term because they're, in many cases, Republican and say, oh, no, we're just doing tariffs. So what I'm looking for from politicians like you is more creative communication and thinking about solving long-term problems like this. And so far, it felt a little simple for this audience, but it's a really hard problem, and it's very hard to get people to engage in the complexity, even for something simple like, oh, let's do light rail. So I'm asking you to maybe give some insight into how, as a politician, both you think about implementing, but also communicating.
I think we in government need to be a lot more innovative as well, right? We've got to be able to change with the times. And when we came out of World War II, as a society, we said, okay, we want to compete in this new world that we helped create. And we want to really emphasize two core things that are important to American values, which is private sector innovation and competition and a free economy, right? But we did not just say that there will be no subsidies for anything. There will be no government role. In fact, we said very explicitly, there's going to be a massive government role in subsidizing not state-owned enterprises, not private companies, not controlling, businesses like in a communist society, but universities. And we did not say Harvard and MIT are just going to have to compete with no government money whatsoever. In fact, we said you're going to get a lot of government money. And we're going to fund all this early stage risky research that then will be turned into commercial products and defense products and everything else.
And guess
by
what?
the
It
private
worked.
sector. And it worked really well, right? Now we're facing competition from China that is really putting a lot of state money, a lot of state subsidies into certain strategic industries like rare earths, and it's very hard for us to compete. So the point is, that the old model of just subsidizing universities may not work well enough given this new competitive challenge. But let's start by recognizing, hey, there is a role for government subsidies, but we also want to be smart about trying to preserve innovative competition where we can. The current administration is pursuing a policy where we are going to take your taxpayer money, government money, and put it into companies that make a profit for the president. They make a profit for the president's family. That is crony capitalism, and that is not a good model, all right? But this is another reason why I think we need next generation Democrats to present an alternative to that embraces innovation. That's why I'm proposing things like reforming the FDA, reforming the SBIR program, to better target innovators like yourselves, who I think will drive the future for our country.
Thank you, Congressman. In the back, green shirt, tall. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Bright. And before I came to Boston, I spent over 10 years in Beijing as a cardiac surgeon. And when I traveled the country, each of the cardiac centers that I have seen there, American Heart Association, American Society of Cardiac Surgeons, and I see the extent to which there's not very huge collaboration.
Yep.
My question is, at what point will the politicians be very innovative to actually create rhetoric that are more peaceful, like you in China and the US? Yes.
This should be part of preventing wars, right? Yeah.
You know, I'm from Africa, Ghana, and we say that when two elephants fight, the grass suffers.
Yep. I love this philosophy. It should be part of the future, but I'm also just giving you a realistic perspective from my position in Washington and the intelligence that we're able to see, that China is also a threat. And that might be what you hear at the business community level, and it's widely supported in surveys and everything else, but it's not necessarily what we can count on the Chinese government for doing. One of the interesting parts of this job is that I often sit in SCIFs. How many of you spend time at SCIF? Not many. Classified information facilities. So this is where you can have classified information, right? And in some ways, you can sort of divide all the problems in the world into two categories. There's one category where you read about something in the New York Times and it sounds really scary, but then you go get the classified version and you're like, oh, we got this. We got it. We're like 3 steps ahead of them. We got this figured out, and it's not going to be a problem. A lot of the issues that we have with Russia, for example, fall into that category, in my experience, doing this for 15 years. There's the other side, which is you read about a problem in the New York Times, and then you go and get briefed on it on the classified side, and you're like, oh my God, this is way worse. This is way worse than the Times thinks that it is, and almost everything from China is in that category, in my experience. So I'm just saying we should not underestimate what Xi Jinping is trying to do, specifically with Taiwan, and we've got to make sure that our policies, whether it's economic policy on collaboration and things like that, which can actually be a tool to reducing tensions and having cooperative relationships that make it more difficult to go to war, or just down to like hard power, strategic deterrence and whatnot. We've got to all make sure we're aligned on preventing a war, because no one wants a war. It's just bad across the board. And I think we need to be a little bit more focused on that as a goal. Thanks.
Go right ahead.
Here.
Thank you for coming.
Quickly, I have a question.
Okay.
In the current administration in the Science Technology Office, it seems that they are focused on funding individuals versus institutions in the new trend. So I wonder what you think about that. And the second question is, I'm in Minneapolis originally, proud to be from, and it's very artist infused, and they would have housing developments for artists, and they would give their portfolios, and they would show whoever the powers that be, and they would have these great blocks for the artists to live, affordable housing. So I wonder, I was thinking about that, I was thinking about AmeriCorps, and I know there were some experiments in earlier years about housing, but I wonder if there could be some experiments around housing, AmeriCorps type programs where people would have to contribute something to the community to live there.
I think it could be a great idea.
And then portfolios of entrepreneurs so that it can be affordable for people who are innovators. I think it could be problematic to you, but I wonder about what you think of that sort of idea for Massachusetts.
I think it could be great. I mean, maybe you should talk to Levi, because the point is, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for innovation in housing, right? It's not just the same old models we've been trying for 50 years and they haven't delivered. There's innovation. What I'm trying to deliver with this transportation agenda is essentially just provide the basic foundation, the infrastructure framework to allow innovations like this to succeed. But if my program can improve rail access to Fitchburg or to Springfield, we still need innovators like yourselves to actually build the housing and build the communities that are carbon-free, walkable, nice to live in communities with lots of art and lots of opportunities and safe for kids and everything else. That's the future. I don't think that we want to take a 45-minute train to Springfield, which is amazing, and then all live in a 1970s housing project, right? So this is an opportunity for innovation as well. And then quick word on Minneapolis. I went to Minneapolis during the ICE siege of the city. I went there out of solidarity for those amazing American patriots who were standing up and fighting for our freedoms and our values, not just for the immigrants in the community, but for our values as a country that are under threat. I also wanted to learn lessons in case ICE came here next. And I wrote a memo to the governor and the lieutenant governor so we're better prepared, because there are a lot of things that people in Minneapolis were doing that were very creative and innovative about, fighting that serious threat from the federal government. So I just want to say that I've seen that art in Minneapolis. I love it, and I'm very proud of the people from your city.
What about the AI?
Funding individuals as opposed to institutions. Look, I'm all for new ideas. This sounds like a way for individuals who have the right connections to the right families to get the dollars. And I hate to say that, but that's what it sounds like to me.
Young lady here.
Thank you, Congressman, for taking the time to be here today. I was curious, you mentioned earlier about how the Democrats have had kind of a failing strategy where their only point has been kind of not Trump. So if or when you get elected, how are you going to kind of get into your role and push those kind of more establishment Democrats to really think outside the box and really push forward this more progressive agenda that we see young people wanting moving forward?
Well, in some ways, it's just a question of literally getting new people with new ideas and maybe some younger people in the room. Look at the United States Senate. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham. This is not a helpful trend. 6 Democrats have died in Congress just in the last term, right? By the way, if we win the Senate, it'll be by 1 vote, almost certainly. We can't afford to have someone that might lose that vote because of a medical emergency, right, at 83 or 84 years old, right? And so that's part of why it's just really important as a party that we get new people with new ideas who are connected with folks like you, who come and have these discussions, right? It's important to have a senator in Massachusetts who likes to take questions at town halls as opposed to someone who refuses to do so.
I don't know if you guys picked this up, but Seth has done 50 town halls, and
50
plus
town halls.
this doesn't even count.
might
But
be-
this
this
is
might-
a
this might be
town
minutes.
hall, right?
But this
And-
back and forth is really important because I don't think I have all the great ideas. I think people like you do, and it's my job to represent you. My job is to work for you, not the other way around, and make sure that these ideas and innovations, get a hearing. But I want to hone in too on where you started, which I think is a really astute observation of the party right now. Okay, quick survey. How many of you are opposed to Trump's immigration enforcement? Pretty overwhelming. How many of you can tell me what Democrats' immigration policy is? This is a big problem, folks, okay? This is a big problem. Every hand in the room went up, and then not a single hand went up. That's a problem, and this is not some idle esoteric issue. This is, I would argue, the #1 domestic issue right now in America today. It's horrific what ICE is doing. They're killing people on the street, right? And yet we're saying that the opposition party, we don't even know where we stand on this, what our solution is, right? This was the #1 issue that we lost the last election on across the board. So how can the party not have a position on this? I'll tell you my position really quickly. Prosecute ICE. It's not enough to just abolish the agency. These thugs need to be prosecuted for breaking the law. You can't enforce the law if you're breaking it. Number 2, we need an immigration system that actually incentivizes people to come here legally rather than illegally. You probably encountered a lot of bureaucracy going through the immigration system. We need to actually make the bureaucracy smooth so we get people here who want to come and be a part of our communities and our economy, but also make it clear that you got to follow the rules, right? And number 3, we have to have a pathway to citizenship for people who have been here, are part of our communities, many of them brought here as kids, who are part of America, but they want to be citizens. And we have to have a very clear pathway to do that. That's not, you do the right thing and show up for an immigration appointment and you get locked up and deported, right? So those are just 3 quick points. We could debate the details for an hour, but those are 3 quick points. It's my immigration policy. Like, we need to be very clear as a party on where we stand on the issues, because when people are hurting and when they're scared, they don't just want opposition. We need leadership.
Quick survey. This is representative of the innovation community. How many of you were born outside the United States?
Amazing. Look at that. Yep.
This is America.
That's right. Well, it's not only America, it's especially the innovation community. I mean, immigrants are disproportionately job creators, disproportionately start new companies, disproportionately do what you're all doing. And that's why immigration is so important. And that's why America has always been a country of immigrants. We need to get back to that. But our party needs to lead on that, not just say, oh, Republicans are the only ones who come up with immigration policy and we're just going to oppose it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Okay, there's so many questions. Trusters, Rodney?
So the defense industry in Massachusetts is, so there's not a lot of help for startups in that industry. You only get any help once you hit a certain phase of SBRI.
Yeah.
So what would you propose, like any changes to help kickstart some innovation? Because that creates a lot of jobs. That's
Yeah.
industry.
Look, I mean, I care about this stuff because I was a Marine, right? I served with some of the most amazing Americans who are willing to risk their lives for their country. I did not grow up interested in politics. That's the reason that I got into this. I served in Iraq. I served in a war that I disagreed with. That happens the senator I'm running against voted for. He voted to send me and thousands of Americans to war in Iraq, in a war that we probably didn't need to fight, right? And that's where I really saw the consequences of failed leadership in Washington. And that's what kind of motivates me to run. So that's part of why I just know a lot about defense. And I want you to understand, like, sort of why, I serve on the Armed Services Committee and everything. And what I see on the Armed Services Committee is that we give a lot of money to the biggest companies in the world, right? And Raytheon's got a big factory in Massachusetts. Raytheon gets a lot of money, and they have a lot of jobs, and they do a lot of important things. But we need to make sure that more of that money, especially in this rapidly changing world, goes to innovators like yourselves, right? This is a common theme here, but I really believe in it. And that's a big problem with Pentagon contracting right now, is the best innovative ideas to keep our troops safe and keep our country safe often come from the newest companies. And it's the hardest way to get into the Pentagon and DoD. But we're working on that.
I'm going to take one last question and a couple of wrap-up things. Ibrahim, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ibrahim Sheikh. I'm a doctor at Israel. Thank you for your time. I'd like to ask you, in general, when somebody tells me that they're younger and they want to change Congress, all the green flags in my brain light up, and very enthusiastic about that. And there's a lot of energy in Democrats these days to shift to a more abundance kind of philosophy, a lot more housing, a lot more energy, a lot more kind of focus on institutions that actually work and give people what they want so that they can regain people's trust and credibility. But the House of Representatives, which is structurally less aligned, does have a lot more controversy and a lot more seeming problems than the Senate, which is much older. What are some things about a younger set of politicians that should give us hope that they're going to get things done well, better for this country, that they are going to have better collaboration across the aisle? Because even if you get 51 in the Senate, unless you do the filibuster, you're probably not going to get 60 anytime soon. Are there younger Democrats and Republicans that are more likely to work with each other for all these kind of issues of housing and affordability and all these common sense things where a lot of Americans, a broad majority, are in agreement, but parties are much more concerned with victories for the party than they are with getting anything done?
Yeah, I mean, so I think part of the problem is that, and this question is like, how do we get people, I mean, fundamentally the question is, how do we get people in Congress who actually get things done? You said a lot of other things, but that's kind of maybe the core essence of your question, right? And I think that's right. I think that a lot of the sort of old guard politicians are very much just entrenched in, fighting and butting heads, and don't actually really do much that makes a difference in your lives, right? So, like, I'll give you just a concrete example of something I've done and sort of how we work through this. So, I actually co-authored 988, the National Mental Health Hotline. So when you see these 988 signs around, you call in an event of crisis. That was my law with a Republican. It's it's saved a lot of lives. In fact, there was just a study that came out that teen suicide is down 11% just because 988 exists. So a lot of kids' lives are getting saved. And people sometimes ask me, okay, that's great, Seth, but this must have been the easiest law to pass in history because it makes so much sense. Like, why wouldn't you want to have a 3-digit mental health hotline? And actually, it was really hard. It was really hard because there were a lot of debates about how it would be funded. There are people who want it funded by the private sector and people who want it funded by the federal government. You can imagine where those partisan lines fell, right? There were a lot of questions about how it would be staffed. You know, some people wanted federal employees, some people wanted volunteers. You can imagine where those sort of partisan lines fell. There was even this knockdown, drag-out fight over what the number would be. And there were people who were totally opposed to the bill because they didn't like the number, even though we commissioned a study to make sure we picked the best number. So the point is that even doing simple things that are clearly good for society are sometimes hard, but you got to get fighters in there who are willing to do it and are willing to find allies to work with across the aisle. In this case, a Republican who was a fellow veteran, had seen the effects of mental health crises. I was actually the first member of Congress to even just talk about dealing personally with mental health issue, discussing post-traumatic stress and how I dealt with it after Iraq. But that's the kind of collaboration that you need to find. So we worked against a Republican majority that didn't want to fund healthcare, didn't want to especially fund mental health care. And we even got that bill passed under Donald Trump in his first term. I don't know what senior moment he was having when he decided to sign it, but we'll take it, right? And the point is that that's the kind of like just roll up your sleeves, get things done, as opposed to just always, you know, introducing bills that are great ideas, but they never get passed. You're just standing in your partisan corner and shouting at the other side rather than finding ways to collaborate. So I'll tell you a quick story to just sort of wrap up on this because in the spring, have any of you ever gone down like a school group to Washington? So it's very popular in the spring, you know, it's a nice time in DC, and the school groups come down and they often will ask me to come out, meet you on the Capitol steps and, you know, answer a few questions and take a picture or whatever. So I had this group of middle schoolers come down. And one of these kids, it was like 8th grader, says like, what do you do up there that matters to me? This kid was kind of arrogant, but, you know, I was like, all right, fair question. And so I told him about 988. And then I shared him a whole bunch of statistics, you know, about how call volume has gone up, text volume has gone up. Really quickly, calls up about 50%, texts up about 1,450%, which is an amazing measure of the young kids getting help, but also a sad measure of the youth mental health crisis in America, right? This was like the worst talk I've ever given because 8th graders don't know statistics, all right? Like it's all over their heads. These numbers meant nothing. They've had the eyes glassing over, like this guy is so boring. So it's total fail, took my picture. They went on to their next thing. But then a woman from another school group came up and said, I'm sorry, sir, I just want to interrupt because your bill saved my daughter's life. And then she introduced me to her 13-year-old daughter. And I just share that example because at a time when people are understandably so frustrated with our politics, so frustrated with Congress, you know, so frustrated with the whole situation in Washington, D.C., that they want nothing to do with it. They just want to check out. I get it. I really get it because I live this every day. And let me tell you, it is super, super frustrating. But it's also important. It's really important. And when our government is failing, we don't need to give up on it. We need to make it better. That's maybe one of the most important lessons I learned in the war. Sometimes you need to fight hardest for your country. Sometimes you need to fight hardest for your country when your country lets you down. And I think that's the moment that we're in right now. That's why I'm running. That's why I want to continue serving all of you. And it's also why your work is so important. Whether you're contributing directly to government, or you're fixing these problems, or you're just part of what makes America such a special and important place, not just for all of us, but for the whole world, we got to keep this up and we got to do better. And it's going to take all of us working together.
Congressman, we have 30 seconds left. We have some Massachusetts voters in the room. This is not a campaign event, but you've made the case for why people should invite you to be our next senator. What can people in the room who heard you speak and are interested in supporting you do to help make sure that you end up our next U.S. Senator?
First, thank you. We do need a lot of volunteers. It's always difficult to unseat an incumbent because he's just better known and he represents the whole state. I represent just a ninth of it. There's that just huge name recognition advantage, especially for casual voters who don't really know, but they just show up and they recognize the name and that's who they vote for. So if you'd like to get involved, you can volunteer in the campaign. Just go to sethmoulton.com or follow us on various social media and sign up to actually go out and knock on doors and make phone calls and things like that. But even if you just send an email, like if you just go home tonight and send an email or whatever messaging app you like to use to 20 of your friends, 50 of your friends, and just say, hey, we should consider Seth for Senate. Seth for Senate's worth, take a look. That would really help because we just need to spread the word and you can be a part of the change that I think we need.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Congressman.
Thanks.